Once upon a time, in a quiet part of the countryside, there stood a house that seemed almost like something from a fairy tale. It was not just big, it was enormous, a mansion with elegant towers, wide terraces, and walls that gleamed in the sunlight. Around the house stretched green lawns, soft and carefully trimmed, that looked as though no blade of grass dared to grow out of place. Flower beds, full of roses, lilies, and tulips, painted the gardens in colors so vivid that they seemed alive, whispering in the breeze. Inside the house, the beauty continued. Tall ceilings arched high above, marble staircases curved like rivers frozen in stone, and enormous windows opened toward the gardens, letting the light pour in like golden waterfalls. Anyone who entered might have believed they had stepped into a place where sorrow could not possibly exist, where every moment was wrapped in peace and wealth. And yet, in this grand home lived a boy whose life was not as free as the butterflies in the garden. He was bound to a wheelchair. His legs, fragile and unresponsive, carried no strength. But his eyes, oh, his eyes were alive. They were bright with curiosity, full of questions about the world he could not yet run across. He would often sit by the window, gazing at the gardens, imagining the feeling of grass beneath his feet, dreaming of chasing the shadows of the trees. The boy's father was a man of power, a businessman known for his iron will, his sharp mind, and his ability to turn any venture into gold. In the world of business, people often feared him. Yet at home, he was different. His heart was soft, especially when it came to his son. No amount of money mattered more to him than the smile of that boy in the wheelchair. He made sure his son never felt forgotten, never felt less than others. There was always love in the way he spoke to him, patience in the way he listened, and pride in the way he introduced him to others. Beside them lived another figure, a young woman. She was beautiful, graceful, her presence as smooth as the surface of a calm lake. At first glance, she seemed tender and caring. She would push the boy's wheelchair through the gardens, pick flowers for him, and laugh softly at his little jokes. Every day she accompanied him outside. They would stroll among the roses, breathe the fresh air, and enjoy the warmth of the sun. She held his hand gently, brushed hair from his forehead, and her gestures seemed to glow with affection. The father would watch from a distance, his heart melting. To him, this woman was kindness embodied. He saw her as someone who loved his son almost as much as he did. Every smile she offered the boy seemed like proof of her loyalty. And so, in the father's mind, there was no room for suspicion, no reason to doubt. But life, as we know, often hides shadows even in the brightest rooms. One afternoon, a boy from the neighboring house appeared at the gates. He was about the same age as the boy in the wheelchair, but his eyes were restless, troubled. His steps were uneven, his hands fidgeted nervously. With a voice that trembled, he told the father something unbelievable. He claimed he had seen strange things happening inside the mansion. He had seen the young woman, the one who seemed so caring, doing something suspicious. He whispered that she had been adding something into the boy's juice, something that didn't belong there. The father was stunned. At first, he dismissed the story. How could such a thing be true? This woman, who smiled so sweetly, who tended to his son with such apparent love, how could she harm the boy? The thought was unthinkable, an insult to trust. He waved it away, convincing himself the neighbor child must have misunderstood, or perhaps let his imagination run wild. But the words stuck in his mind like a thorn. He tried to ignore them, yet they returned at night when he closed his eyes, and in the day when he watched the woman pour his son a drink. Slowly, doubt began to take root. He found himself watching her more carefully, listening more closely, and each gesture that once seemed tender now carried the shadow of suspicion. Days passed, and the unease grew heavier. The father, a man who had built his empire by trusting no one blindly, decided he could no longer rely on appearances. He would find the truth with his own eyes. And so, he began to observe in secret. He hid behind doors, lingered near windows, watched from behind the hedges in the garden. He studied her movements, waiting for a sign. For a while, nothing happened. She played her role perfectly, gentle touches, soft smiles, the caring guardian of his son. But then, one day, the truth revealed itself. The father watched as the woman entered the boy's room with a tray. On it was a glass of orange juice. But before she placed it on the table, she reached into her pocket. With delicate fingers, she pulled out a small packet. She glanced around quickly, as if making sure no one was watching. Then, with a subtle flick of her wrist, she poured the powder into the drink and stirred it carefully until it dissolved. The father's heart froze. A storm of emotions struck him all at once: horror, rage, disbelief, and above all, the crushing weight of betrayal. He had trusted her, welcomed her into their lives, believed she was a source of comfort. But instead, she was a poison in their home. In that terrible moment, he understood everything. The boy's frailty, his inability to grow stronger despite all care, was not fate. It was deliberate. She had been keeping him weak, stealing his health day by day, ensuring he remained dependent. For what purpose? Control? Advantage? Whatever her reason, it was monstrous. That very evening, the father confronted her. There was no screaming, no dramatic scene. His face was stone, his voice like steel. He told her she had no place in their home anymore, no place near his son. Without argument, without second chances, he ordered her out. The door closed behind her, and it was as though a dark cloud lifted from the mansion. Silence returned, but it was not the heavy silence of suspicion. It was a silence filled with relief, with fragile hope. For the first time in a long while, the father felt that his son might truly have a chance. And indeed, the boy began to change. Slowly, day by day, his strength returned. No longer poisoned, his body started to heal. Each morning, he practiced little exercises. At first, it was only moving his arms, then trying to lift himself from the chair, then taking part in simple tasks, holding objects, pushing his wheels without help. The progress was slow, but undeniable. His muscles grew firmer, his eyes brighter, his laughter more confident. The father stayed by his side through it all, encouraging him, lifting him when he fell, praising him for every small victory. 2 months later, the miracle happened. With the father standing beside him, the boy took his first step. It was shaky, awkward, and uncertain, but it was real. One step, then another, his father's hand steadying him, guiding him, celebrating with every heartbeat. Tears filled the man's eyes, and he did not hide them. They streamed down his face as he watched his son do what once seemed impossible. The boy was walking. Each step was not just movement, it was freedom. It was proof that the dark chapter of deception was over. No longer a prisoner of weakness, he was becoming strong, independent, alive. And so, the story did not end with betrayal. It ended with hope. It ended with a boy who discovered his own strength, with a father who never stopped believing, and with the promise of a life where every step forward was a step toward happiness. Dear friends, that is the story of the boy in the wheelchair, the father who loved him, and the truth that set them free. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, because there are many more stories waiting to be told.